We've rarely ever had so much exceptional grinder quality for so little money laid out on the table before. The Varia VS3 is diligently preparing to undoubtedly take the coveted top spot in the world of entry-level espresso grinders. In this espresso grinder video, we will go over what it can do, where it might have weaknesses you have to accept, and other important features to consider with this piece of equipment. Somewhere, the espresso journey begins for each of us. For many, it started with affordable espresso grinders and machines. And so we're always on the lookout for really good, affordable materials. So espresso grinders, espresso machines, both of course. And the Varia VS3, that's with, I believe, just under 400 euros regular price and an even cheaper price, now somehow for a pre-order, just really quite affordable and attractive, making it a great deal for potential buyer. In the more affordable segment, especially when you can clearly see that it's definitely not a plastic bomb and is well made. There are less expensive options, but at first glance, it's an exceptionally elegant, high quality, well built, beautifully crafted, Chinese manufactured espresso grinder. Yes, indeed, it really is.
I would say so, yes, good summary. It feels very, I find it very valuable. Also, I think, for example, this is an example. This ring, it is fixed with magnets. And of course, I have it at the front because I might want to read it from the front, but maybe I want to read it from the side. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But even that, it's all high quality. The cup is solid, also with a magnet inside. Could we possibly discuss it sometime later then? Otherwise, there's simply just the button there. Yes, there's just a button.
It's a single dosing grinder mainly for grinding espresso. It's a single dosing espresso grinder. We'll also look at that today. We will go over all the parameters we look at in our espresso grinder tests again, and of course then make an espresso. Michel and we have had them for quite some time now. We have two models here, we need to say something about them. You also had it at home for a few weeks, and just in contrast, it stood next to your chic big black Sanremo U. Now this little grinder. Thingy's grinder body, and there she also has an elegant, graceful, and incredibly charming figure.
Yes, absolutely. I must say I really enjoyed the grinder at home. For me, it's really great when I know in the long run, we're filming the mill over the next 4 weeks, can take it home, can really test it thoroughly, and also get my wife's perspective, who will actually use it and provide feedback. And then we have a shared perspective on the grinder. And I have to say, that's really fun indeed. So indeed, if you think about it, true value for money in the end.
We can just mark that here at the beginning, although we'll have another espresso in a moment, but we've had a lot of espresso already, so we can mark it here as well. This is a positive review because we tested it and it was indeed positive, and there are a few things we didn't like. Michel, really quick, two models, so which one is which here? I always notice that inside there's this coarse, rough layer hidden most of the time.
Black.
Alloy or surface coating, and it catches plenty of coffee grounds which stick there.
Yes, the other one too. But it's not like that. Yeah, because it's been in use longer.
It has a stainless steel or polished surface over here. The coffee slides down a bit better. Still, it catches a bit of material up here, but that's just part of it. You see the difference? What else is different?
Yes, that would truly be it. Actually, there's another more powerful engine.
But same power.
But the same formidable strength. We were informed in this particular version, so this is version 1, even if it's somewhat unclear. This is version 2 now. The acoustic difference here is almost exactly 1 decibel. It's not an entirely different world. It really doesn't sound completely different at all. Apparently, there was some individual grinder that was sent back due to a motor defect, causing considerable issues. And then they were eventually replaced with new ones to resolve all problems. That's why there's now generation 2 available. And if you order it now, you're usually placing your order now, it's still in stock, generation 2, and then you already have the newest motor model with improved features. However, we heard from several dealers who haven't ever received a grinder back from any customer. So it was apparently just a minor thing, and that's why there's now a generation 2
Nonetheless, let's briefly talk about the motor, or rather the small motor in connection with a really slow rotational speed of the grinding discs and accordingly a very slow grinding process. That's actually the first thing you immediately notice right away. This is the slowest mill by far that we've measured so far in all of our testing. So every other grinder, even the cheaper grinders which we tested, are faster. Of course, it only spins at a certain speed of 160 rotations or 170 per minute, which is quite slow. So the RPM is extremely low.
So take a look.
Yeah.
You can see the cone spinning already.
Well, I can run faster.
Well, I mean, 170 per minute, that's around 3 rotations per second, which is incredibly slow indeed. Yeah, rough calculations? Yeah, definitely. So you can literally watch it spin. It's real. And that is definitely, and I really have to make it clear from the start, I have completely
lost yourself while you have been grinding.
Yes, so. But you simply begin to engage in so many various activities during this incredibly long extended grinding time. So a small example, we often drink 2 flat whites and then I make 2 double shots. So that means during the time the grinder, so I sprayed the coffee, put it in, let it grind, removed the portafilter, cleaned it, prepared the milk jugs, poured the milk, set them up, and then the first grind was done. And at the same time, I weighed the beans for the next grind for the second one, so it takes time.
When we grind for 10 seconds, we grind approximately 6.7 grams.
We grind 6.7 grams.
Well, I'd say it's a unique grinder for anyone wanting to practice mindfulness in a serene environment. Because you are able to follow every individual rotation like this, accompany each coffee bean into the designated bean slot, and truly connect on a deeper, more meaningful level with the entire grinding process. And yes, you have the time to deeply connect with this grinder.
So it's a meditative mill.
Even if the sound isn't quite like the ocean waves, but more, I don't know, like a bee on cocaine, it's still fascinating in its own unique way. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. I'd like to add something here. You know, I'm always the type, with first impressions I get skeptical, and I need more time to truly understand things. That included the Varia.
It took quite a bit, mindfulness coming back into play here again.
Yes, it surely required a significant amount of patience and mindfulness to handle the grinder properly, to undergo it. Exactly, because I want to take them home, I want to try them out, I want to give every grinder a chance. And we were at this stall in Athens, and I walked by there. Already a day before we made this video, there's a video you'll surely link it to from Athens, where we were at all the stalls.
World of Coffee.
Exactly. And then I walked past that booth and there was this strange whistling noise and it caught my attention, so I decided to see what caused it. I'm not entirely sure if these are the same grinder from back in the summertime, but I assume because we ordered ours right away too.
You definitely said something like, I'm not going there.
No, I'm not going there because I can't listen to that. And I have the feeling either I perceived it differently in that hall or I got used to it, because I don't find it that bad anymore, as I felt it there. But we also had a participant in the Home Barista Championships who also had a Varia with him, Peter. And I also wrote to Peter, got his feedback too. And there I noticed it again. I was, I think, busy with latte art during the finals.
Where was the bee?
It was the bee again, the bee on Coke. I think that's a great comparison. And then it really went like, wee. That's a good comparison.
How is the tone exactly, 73 or relatively light?
We are at 73 decibels. We are at 73 decibels with the new one. The old one is 72, the new one is a bit louder, so 1 decibel. Can also be within measurement tolerance. Exactly.
You said leave it in the colander. You mean you didn't measure exactly?
Yes, of course. There's a clear procedure, by the way, for how we measure. It's always the same height, always the same distance of the grinder at 60, so on table amount. Just like how you grind at home and naturally with a delicious cup of coffee.
It's a decibel diff.
Exactly. 6.7 grams in 10 seconds, which means if you want to grind 18 grams, that's roughly 25 seconds of grinding time, up to nearly 30. And I brew at home with a very long pre-infusion, meaning I am really very, very fine. There it really is, so I've never timed it, but I would say guaranteed 30 seconds. What I would really recommend with the grinder, it's also included in the package, is also the glass, I would say now, feels very high quality, is a small spray. Bin?
What now? Blown up live in the video. We were just about to praise him for the quality, right?
We were about to give him some praise.
In comparison to many of the other plastic things we've had recently, but let's just leave that behind because it's not that important anyway.
Exactly. I'm dropping things everywhere, I see.
Sometimes not at the right moment either.
Works normally as usual. I would really recommend it to you because it draws some static electricity on one side to the tube that goes down, and here at the back to the housing. And you can break that up well with the water spray right before grinding for a smoother and more even application. That makes perfect sense with the mill.
Michel, let's quickly look at the external stories before we dive back in and also talk about retention and such. We already mentioned it's actually quite a slim box. Could you tell us the specific dimensions, please?
So we are at a depth of 15 centimeters measured, exactly until some cables are visibly sticking out. We are carefully examining a width of about 9 centimeters and a height just over 31 centimeters, noting their significance for our detailed study. It comes along with this particular bellows. You can also remove it if you want and then put the lid securely back on. I find it somewhat cumbersome because it tends to drift away quite a bit at times, which can be distracting. I have observed that you generally don't have too much residual material left inside, thanks to the efficient and well-designed bellows system. However, it helps get those last tenths out, and that's exactly why I prefer to use it at home in this way, rather than any other method, to ensure optimal performance. And I think that's almost too strong to take away every day.
Okay, but it needs a lid so it doesn't popcorn. So at that moment, when we are grinding, it makes sense to put a lid on, so nothing jumps out at you. We've emphasized this several times with other grinders. There was that long cable hanging out the back. This is really good here. This is elegant. So you're saying 15 depth, also because we have such a small, elegant power plug here. I find that very pleasant, honestly.
But
for that, we've got the big gun down below.
That attaches at the bottom. Yeah.
Well.
Exactly.
Michel. What burrs do we have?
We've got a 48 millimeter conical burr in there. This setup leads to a certain amount of static electricity. Now we'll move on to the particle distribution. Normally, conical grinding discs often tend to produce more fines. We'll talk about it later.
And of course, they have a bit of retention.
Exactly. We always test it like this. So with single dose grinders, not 100% relevant, but it's just part of it. That means we stop grinding while there are still coffee beans on top. Then we remove the broken beans that lie on top away. Well, and the whole thing. That still makes sense. And everything that really does end up in the grinding room and often happens on the way to, what did we call it again in the last video we filmed together before this one? The drop shaft, exactly. Everything that gets stuck in there, we measure. And that was 1.8 grams at the mill.
However, again, normally this is a test that's actually useful for beans with a bean container. With single dosing grinders, you put it in and let it grind through. And when you let it grind through, you don't have those 1.8 grams left, but you get a different value.
We had a standard deviation when using 18 grams of 0.05. And you really have to say, if you put in 18 grams, you get 18 grams out. Sometimes that's how these occasional 0.5 instances come about, so it happens 0.05. That once it comes out as 17.9 and at another time as 18.1 exactly.
I would in turn attribute that to the scale's tolerance, which often affects the accuracy of our readings.
Ah, you can too.
0.05.
0.05.
It's negligible. Basically, if you give it some time, the mindfulness probably wasn't high enough in the instances where the gram didn't come out, because you just stopped at 17.9 after 20 seconds. No.
I think it's good that you say that, because that was really a point. We really talked it over together. Since we have recently made some adjustments for all mills to about 30 seconds, since we safely assumed that a mill usually never ends up taking more than 30 seconds to get that all out of the system.
That's quite close.
It's borderline close. It has always sufficed. You can hear it when the beans are out too. That was really with the hard border option. Yes, slower. Would then be out of range, so we need to redefine the range again.
The cup is really quite nice. However, there's already a bit of residue left right on the rim, which is a little annoying.
This is mine from home.
Exactly what we criticized with the Timor Sculptor, the cheaper one, the 64, we have to say here too. It's simply coated, and in regular use, especially when repeatedly inserting it into the portafilter and so on, it does unfortunately suffer a bit over time due to wear and tear. Does the diameter fit the portafilter?
That's exactly what I find really, really unfortunate. Because I would now wish, really, I would like to explain it.
And the effective way to actually build a beautiful latte colored cup.
A black cup of the same exact height with wings firmly attached, just like our own cup is built. And that I then set it on the portafilter, because that's probably around 54, 55.
Yeah, perhaps they thought, let's go and add a somewhat more affordable grinder to then make the Dedica or Sage material available.
Dedicate.
That's a 52.
That could potentially get quite tight, just as you mentioned. Exactly. And that's really something I've been constantly experimenting with at home to find the most effective methods and results over time. How do I get from this to that? So sure, just put it on and then take it out, and then you have a very distinct edge. A bit larger than with the Timor, but in practice it really helps to redistribute it quite well. That really helped me because in the end, I actually did it like this, because with 18 grams you're already quite high. It comes out relatively airy as well, and then I went down to the ground like that, out, and then it was really like a small, peaceful place that felt serene and almost magical. Mountain, I'd say. And then, for the first time, compress it vertically a bit so the coffee spreads out initially. And then with the WDT tool, needle tool, spread it out nicely, compressed vertically again, and then tamped. And so it worked really well. I think that's really a shame. I would prefer a much larger 58 size cup for that. Thanks a lot, really.
Nice. It's really not there, but you can still deal with it.
Absolutely.
Missed the opportunity? Okay, then just briefly, the little device is actually very compactly built and well designed. Does that have consequences for our temperature development?
No, we have a temperature increase of 0.9 degrees. No big deal.
So it doesn't marginally escalate over multiple references, whereas the manufacturer themselves say we shouldn't.
Precisely. According to the description, it instructs that we should allow a waiting period of 90 seconds after performing a continuous grinding session of 60 seconds. Of course, we didn't do that. We wanted to see if it would finally heat up, but it didn't. Right, but look, it's just a single dose. And if I already imagine having to grind away for that long again, it feels exhausting. Then don't. So 60 seconds of grinding coffee would be 2 servings already. And then you still have to brew and serve. Right? So I don't think you'll push them to the limit.
Michel, price-wise, we are very affordable. Yes, but we also have a limitation with this device, namely the grinding discs, which are rated for 150 kilos. That's what it means. As the manufacturer says, that's how many kilos you can process with them. That's significantly less than what other manufacturers are stating.
Yeah, so with a regular household grinder, grinding discs in the price range of somewhere around 600, 700, or let's say 500, 600 euros, we're often dealing with about half a ton. That's already a lot, even 150 if you imagine. I don't know how much coffee you drink at home, but I don't drink a kilo a week. I might drink 250 grams a week.
Let it just be a kilo a month. Hamburg, Stirum, then you're at 12 kilos.
Then you're at 12 kilos. So it lasts over 10 years. And that's why I always think in the gastronomic sector, it's super crucial for us whether the mill can handle a ton or 1.5, or the grinding wheel itself. Here with 150 kilos, it's still considered quite a lot. But I believe after 10 years of use, you should definitely treat the machine to new grinding discs, depending on your coffee consumption at home.
The grinder itself, it's just simply not a grinder that is inclined to give you much coffee. And that's exactly why she restricts herself there, and as a result has a specific shelf life already predetermined in advance. Which, we should also say, we've had this mill for, how long have you had it?
We got it in the summer and it's only in 3 weeks now.
We don't know how it will develop exactly, so we can't say anything about the durability over time. But there are these announcements. Michel, are you ready for espresso?
For an espresso.
Then, I'll practice mindfulness and you can start painting.
That's really good.
Find something else here.
It doesn't have such a nice splash. What I find really awesome is that the cup becomes empty when you tilt it. Sure, it's stainless steel. You can see even the tiniest crumbs.
The strength of this coffee is really the body here. And it has a cocoa note, quite a bit of bitterness, though the bitterness is very pleasant. So, not uncomfortable, but exactly like you said, we're maintaining a perfect state of balance. Balance is an important criterion in espresso, but in this case, the coffee clearly shows more of the darker facets, showing more of the body. And now, in this instance, the acid is the least prominent attribute present here.
Yes, that was Henrike too.
Despite Henrike, but Henrike.
Can also have some acidity, can also bring more acidity.
We took a short break and shaved us. It's a new day. And actually changed clothes too, but we're wearing the same thing today. And the conclusion of the video is still missing. We want to talk about it now, or rather, report to you how the particle distribution is. So we tasted the espresso. And we had a really good espresso. Absolutely, yes. And yet, we had an intriguing particle distribution that wasn't always the same, revealing unexpected results. Maybe we should add, we're making an espresso first. So how does the procedure continue?
So first set it up, then we make the first espresso, roughly use up 1 kilo, actually through every grinder. So we have the same values everywhere, and then, yeah, they used to say that you have to season in grinders like this, and that we grind more than 1 kilo through the grinder and burrs. And then we do the first measurement of the particle size of the dialed-in grinder for always the same espresso. This is also the specific particle distribution that is the most crucial for us to understand. And then we transition from the espresso particle size to ristretto, that means very, very fine. To see, on the one hand, what happens to the particle distribution when you go very, very fine. And on the other side as well, we check if the very cheap grinders are actually able to grind fine enough for espresso and ristretto, which is often not the case. Do we even reach this extremely fine area? Then we move on to a slightly more intense lungo, and then just effortlessly visually restore it back to the initial setting we first used for the initial espresso preparation. And that remains for us the parameter that indicates to us if, after optical adjustment, we reach those same values again. And there we had a deviation.
There we had a significant deviation, especially in the fine fraction. We jumped from 24 to 31%. So obviously, later in the measurement with the extraction, we were clearly not quite yet back to where we had previously and initially been situated before. Yes. That is indeed a very clear phenomenon that often distinguishes cheaper grinders from the significantly more expensive ones in the market. That they particularly struggle immensely when there is such an abrupt shift from fine to coarse and finally back to medium. And this is what the measurement shows us here. But I have to say honestly, if we had a big particle analysis device here, I would have liked to do this measurement again. Because you also mentioned that in your everyday life, you didn't seem to notice such drastic changes.
Yes, absolutely. Mainly because I don't go from espresso lungo to espressos, and at home now I switch between our coffees from 2.5 to about 3.5 as I enjoy the variety and the unique flavors each blend offers. I'll put it this way, this range, not the massive changes everyone talks about. And there, I didn't notice it as significantly, although I often attribute the changes where I need to adjust finer simply to the aging process of the coffee.
But you haven't changed an insane number of recipes at home either?
Throughout that entire period up until today, there have been exactly 4 distinct varieties of coffee available.
Yeah, but when you had a coffee, did you just stick with that one or did you grab another?
We often have 2, since the in-laws decided not to really count the fruity ones for some reason or another. That worked well. Simply due to the aging process, I now know with the Varia that after just 1 week, the coffee in the bag needs a slight line to stay fresh, to return to the same value.
So once again, we have one of the most striking differences between test 4, that's what we call this sample, and test 7. In the fine fraction, not in the main peak. The main peak is only shifted by about 20-25 microns.
So it's similar. But the fine detail producers, of course, have much more resistance. You must be very clear.
In the brews, we didn't experience it as strongly. I would have liked to run a second round here just to verify that again, but we simply have this. The device is not presently available here at home to take another level measurement. Nevertheless, it is part of transparency, Michel, to clearly present these numbers here and say we have a major difficulty in measurement. And that's certainly, one must also say, one of the single dosing criteria we have looked at. Next to that, does everything come out? Is the grind consistency there? And are the recipes back again? And that wasn't the strength here. In everyday measurement, we had fewer problems with it, and I'm super interested to hear from you how you're doing. So you also have the grinder, right? And have you also had experiences with how hard it is to hit the grind size again? Like when you switch from, say, an Americano with the same grind size, but ended up with a Lungo or something? Or maybe someone tried to make Turkish coffee and later an espresso. If you've had any experiences, feel free to write them in the comments. Would really interest me. We will?
When we do the next test series again, perhaps then we will have the opportunity to experiment with the new strategy. So we'll do another detailed analysis, and there will definitely be a small but significant update.
Yeah.
I did some shopping.
We need to measure them again. Maybe we'll do that comparison measurement here again.
Exactly. So let's dive back into that. These are the grinding cones, the 3 different ones you can order and replace. This ensures you maintain the grind quality. I'm quite excited about this one because according to their analyses, it should produce the least amount of fines, which is exactly what we have been striving for in our recent projects. I'd be very curious about filters. We'll put that in David's hands as well.
We will examine that together in detail. And in that sense, we still have a bit to do with the grinder. Another upgrade, which unfortunately costs money, we criticize this thing here.
Yes.
In fact, Varia has already responded, but you'll need to spend more money for that. And you can actually purchase a better dosing container that fits the portafilter perfectly. Is it any good though? I've heard some positive feedback.
He's actually quite good. He's got some wear. It's not like a top notch, honestly, but that wasn't the expectation anyway.
I still never like wings.
Yeah, he sinks quite relatively far away over there. So it fits completely, the whole distance fits in here. However, I discovered it at home to be an absolutely enormous update to that. I just think it's a bit of a shame that something like that has to cost extra money. Yes.
Perhaps you might eventually be on board participating in the upcoming iteration, but maybe the mill then won't cost 360.70, but 450, and maybe you'd prefer to buy it separately if you're interested. Dear friends, that was our feedback on the Varia VS3.
VS3.
A really cool grinder. That's undeniably our impression when looking across all sorts of different categories. For starters, for anyone who wants to make espresso, wants a bit of flexibility, wants a sleek grinder with a seemingly high quality build. It's fun, looks great on the table, though it is just light, but it's indeed a great mill. So it was quite fun for everyone.
I'm still kind of at a total loss for words.
I'd say it's generally in the range between 300 and 400 euros, in the price range. I would say it's unmatched.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to spend between 300 and 400 euros, this is definitely a very interesting choice. That's it for today. That was the Varia VS3. And now we say goodbye and wish you a good week.